The World Ends With You has to be my favorite game that I never beat. That is to say, The World Ends With You was a game that was on my radar for years, to the point where I got the original DS version years after its original release, but I could never get into it. I tried, and as much as I can respect the gameplay as an excellent portrayal of the game's themes, that sadly didn't make it any more enjoyable for me to play it personally. Flash forward a couple years when the sequel, Neo The World Ends With You, was on the cusp of releasing, and I thought, this is it. I'm gonna get back into this game and I'm gonna beat it. I then lost to a boss after half an hour without saving. At that point, I just couldn't continue. I know, I'm deeply ashamed of myself too, but that aside, I knew that I wanted to get Neo, so I needed to experience the story of the original game in some way. Thus, I began to watch the remaining cutscenes of the game on YouTube, and while I'm sure I lost something from not grinding through the game firsthand, I still enjoyed the story that was told, especially the exact thing that I was looking forward to seeing the most: the story and development of the protagonist, Neku Sakuraba. Upon introduction to Neku, we're shown a scene that is largely isolated to the overarching plot, yet the perfect introduction to his character. We see him roaming the streets of Shibuya, surrounded by people in chatter all around him. In response, he tells them all to shut up and get away from him. Whether this was out loud or something he kept to himself, it made the point clear. Neku has zero regard for others. As he arrives at his destination, a mural of graffiti, his internal monologue further details.
All the world needs is me. I got my values, so you can keep yours, alright?
As he puts on his headphones to drown out all the remaining noise, he continues.
I don't get people. Never have, never will.
No introduction could have done the character better justice, because now any player knows exactly what kind of person Neku is, and furthermore, what kind of person he's going to grow beyond. The next we see of Neku, he's waking up in the middle of those same streets, utterly confused and bewildered as to how he got there. With the pin in his hand allowing him to hear other people's thoughts, a timer engraved on his hand, a cryptic message on his phone regarding what to do before the timer runs out, a bunch of evil frog noise, the monsters within this game, attacking him, the crowded masses ignoring his cries for help, and a random girl asking him to forge a pact with her. It's easy to understand how overwhelmed Neku is, certainly not helped by the later revelation that his memories have been taken away from him. All of this is because he is now in the Reaper's game, a twisted chance of revival for those that have perished, and the only way to make it through the week-long game and reclaim the life he's apparently lost is to place his trust in someone else. Despite his new partner Shiki Misaki's good intentions of getting them both out of the game alive, this is something he fails spectacularly at for the better part of the week. His abrasive attitude continues to come through in spite of, and somewhat because of, his lack of memory as to why he is this way, leading to several moments of Neku hitting some pretty low points. On just day 2, some Reapers overseeing the game try to trick Neku into killing Shiki under the pretense that it would help him leave the game early, this being a blatant lie, and Neku, the protagonist of the game, actually tries to go through with it. Let me reiterate, Neku tried to kill Shiki, and he would have done so if not for intervention from Sanae Hanakoma, aka Local Dick. Later on in the week, when Rhyme, one of a pair of players that Shiki had gotten close to, and therefore tried to force Neku to be friendly with too, is erased, Neku insists that he hadn't cared about her at all, shooting down any attempt from Shiki to force him to care by saying that he doesn't need anyone else. Friends only drag people down, he says. They just talk like idiots and get people to expose themselves, only to wind up hurting them later. Even with all of this though, a look into Neku's thoughts shows that he is indeed hurting, with the feeling of watching Rhyme die, reminding him of a pain he can't even recall. Neku is undeniably a horrible person at this point in the story, but you can't help but wonder what experiences he's forgotten led to him being so callous. He could have once been different, but too many bad experiences with people have likely forged him into who he is. In this Reaper's game though, and in his real life, that's still something that he needs to change. It isn't until Shiki is forced into her own spiral of depression on day 6 that Neku is forced to try to understand her for a change, lest they fail the mission for the day as he tries and fails to pull both of their weight. As he finally learns about her own insecurities, her feelings of inferiority for her friend Eri, he begins to actually form a connection to her. Neku spends so much time trying to push people away that when he gets to see the real Shiki for the first time, he actually tries to help her. And in spite of his prickly nature, he can actually be pretty helpful. It sounds like a small occurrence, but the way it's executed on that one singular day in the story does wonders to show that these two have finally come to terms with each other. Almost enough for Neku to finally consider Shiki a friend. With this new bond, they're able to be 2 or 3 individuals that make it to the end of the week without being erased, the third being Rhyme's partner, Beat. However, the game's conductor, Megumi Kitaniji, claims that only one of them can be revived. With Beat wanting to stay in the game as a Reaper to see if he can bring Rhyme back by doing so, Neku forfeits the spot to Shiki without any fight, since she actually remembers something worth going back to, Eri. With a heartfelt goodbye, the two promise to meet again once Neku is able to come back, and Shiki is whisked away. And then, Kitaniji pulls back the curtain. Neku's memories are suddenly returned to him, save for the actual moment of his death, as it was actually his entrance fee, that which was most important to him and taken in order for him to enter the game. And Kitaniji declares a new entrance fee for him, Shiki Misaki. Unless Neku can win, her life hangs in the balance, and she can't go back to the real world unless he wins the week. It's revealed in the secret reports that this was just Kitaniji covering for the fact that he's presently unable to revive people, but the fact Neku believed that Shiki could be the most important thing in his world already speaks volumes as to how important she had become to him over that week. As he enters his second week, knowing what's at stake, Neku wastes no time this go-around in trying to find someone that can serve as his partner, knowing that he has no other choice but get close to someone if he wants to save Shiki. As an ultimate test of his patience for others, he finds himself paired with local smug jerk Joshua. And he isn't just any smug jerk, he clearly knows way more than he lets on, and on top of that, he isn't even dead. He's a living person with the ability to interact with the plane the Reaper's game takes place in, and is just playing it for unknown reasons. His smugness, arrogance, and unwillingness to explain the reasons why he's playing the game, if not to come back to life, do nothing to endear him to the already reserved Neku. Of course, things only got worse once Neku realized he could read Joshua's mind, as he could with every still living person, and saw a memory that stood out above the rest. Joshua pointing a gun towards Neku and pulling the trigger. Of course, Neku is more than a little upset to learn that Joshua is likely the one that killed him and the reason he's in this situation in the first place, but he still presses on, not only because he knows that acting out could just put him at a disadvantage to Joshua, but because he realizes that the pact has been made, and to win the week and save Shiki, he needs to put up with the partner he has. And then when the week ends, his patience almost pays off in a way, as he gets to learn more about Joshua and the events surrounding his death. Joshua actually had his gun pointed at Sho Minamimoto, this week's game master, and the one really behind Neku's death. Immediately after learning this though, Joshua sacrifices himself at the end of the week to protect Neku, in spite of all the antagonism that existed between the two. Seeing this devastated Neku, knowing that he blamed the wrong person for his death, and that said person was willing to sacrifice his life to protect him, filled Neku with a sense of guilt. And he later decided that despite the many downs the two had, Joshua was his friend in the end. While the storyline with Joshua made up a majority of Week 2, Neku had plenty of other lessons to learn during the week that are just as worth discussing, if not more. Of course, there's Hanekoma telling Neku the whole lesson he needs to learn. The world ends with you. Yeah, title drop, but what he really means by this has a profound impact on Neku. By saying this, he means that one's own world only goes so far as their own perception of it, so staying within boundaries is a pretty limited life to live. You have to push your boundaries as far as they can possibly go in every respect, and for Neku specifically, he needs to let others in. By letting others in, sharing beliefs, and even struggling with others, only then can his world grow and can he enjoy his life to its fullest. With all of these experiences of interacting with people over the past couple weeks under his belt though, Neku begins to feel true pain once more as Nao and Sota, two players that he had gotten at least mildly amicable with, were erased just as Rhyme was. Unlike with Rhyme though, Neku takes this hard. Ever antagonistic, Joshua comments that he didn't think Neku cared about people at all, and Neku admitted that, yeah, to him most people were strangers, but since the Reaper's game, he's talked to them, even a little bit. He felt his world grow, and now he can see that others are people too. He can't just ignore their pain anymore. He recognizes it for what it is. Neku comes to this conclusion during the week where Joshua is glued to his side, belittling him left and right, and sometimes even encouraging a handful of his negative worldviews while discouraging his growth. In spite of that, Neku managed to make a change. He realized his fault in his own view of the world. Like he himself said, his world did expand. Going back to the end of week 2, Kitanichi once again claims that Neku needs to play again because the existence of Joshua, a living person, as his partner made the game's result null, and he sent him back into the game in week 3. However, he now has the goal of eliminating him as soon as possible by taking advantage of his newfound respect for people and making his new entry fee every single other player. And without a partner, Neku is doomed to be erased in minutes. However, he gets massively lucky when Beat, who is still a Reaper throughout all of week 2, decides to step down from his status and forge a pact with Neku, putting himself at great risk to save him. Beat's amazing character moment aside though, it's worth noting how willing and grateful Neku is for the chance to work with Beat, in spite of them being at each other's throats for most of week 1. On top of that, he is incredibly receptive to Beat when he begins discussing his history with Rhyme, and is even considerably forgiving, at least compared to how he used to be, to Beat's, well, less than intelligent decisions. At this point, Neku is fully transformed past the Neku that Beat had first met. Throughout week 3, Neku continues his mission of trying to save Shiki, along with the rest of the players turned into entrance fees, not just by winning, but also by defeating and overthrowing Kitanichi. Ultimately, he succeeds in defeating the game's conductor, but there was way more going on behind the scenes than Neku could have ever known. During the battle with Kitanichi, Neku gets to team up with not just Beat and a recently saved Shiki, but a mysteriously alive and well Joshua. Once the battle concludes though, he learns why. Joshua is the composer of Shibuya, essentially Kitanichi's higher-up and something akin to a god. The two had a bet going where if Kitanichi could prove that the people of Shibuya could improve, which he tried to do by means of brainwashing everyone and ending conflict, making him a foil to what Neku has become, then Joshua would spare Shibuya from mass erasure. However, Joshua was allowed to add one player to be his proxy during this bet, and that player was Neku, the worst person that he could find for the Reaper's game. In order to do this, he was indeed the one that killed Neku, not Minamimoto, and with Neku having beaten Kitanichi, the bet is over with Joshua as the winner, and Shibuya now set for erasure. Needless to say, Neku is floored, confused, and enraged by these revelations, that the guy that he had finally decided to consider his friend would be such an incomprehensible monster in his eyes. It wasn't all over though, as Joshua decides to give Neku one chance to save Shibuya via an old-fashioned duel. Each of them was given a gun, and whoever shoots the other first, wins. Even after all of this though, Neku can't do it. Even after everything that Joshua did, he had already decided to see Joshua as a friend, and he couldn't bear to shoot his own friend. He wasn't the same Neku from the beginning that nearly killed Shiki for his own freedom. Of course, Joshua doesn't hesitate to shoot Neku, but instead of getting erased, Neku wakes up in Shibuya's Scramble Crossing once again. It's not said outright in the game's dialogue, but it's pretty clear. Joshua noticed how Neku, who he had perceived to be one of the worst people in the entire district, was capable of changing and improving. Even though he won the bet, his own proxy served as proof that maybe Shibuya deserved another chance after all. The fact that Neku's growth was so staggering that even a god took notice of it speaks volumes. The ending scene, much like the game's opening, focuses on Neku's internal monologue, but this time it's directed squarely to Joshua. He reflects on those weeks inside the game, and how hard it was for him to confront all of his worldviews, seeing how wrong all of them were. Even still, he learned so much through those games, and he got a handful of what he once considered to be a burden but now cherishes. Friends. He wasn't ready to forgive Joshua for the hell that he had put him through, but he was willing to trust that Shibuya will be alright. After all, one of the things he learned in the game was to trust his partner. Neku began the game as a selfish, asocial, borderline inhuman dirtbag. Everyone else to him was a non-factor in his life that he did his best to ignore, and if he couldn't, he pushed them away. That was what he believed to be the best way to enjoy his life. At the end of the game, though, he sees that the world isn't as stifling as he thought. Rather, it was he who was stifling himself. By growing, reaching out to others, and forging bonds, Neku's world grew so much larger. That's basically the end of the analysis, but it is worth mentioning my thoughts on his appearance in A New Day and Neo: The World Ends With You. In A New Day, it is good to see more of his bond with Beat and how they're really good friends now, and it's definitely good to see that he kept his word on trusting Joshua with Shibuya. Seeing him get shot, for a third time now, at the end and being killed once more left me feeling appropriately hollow. After all the time I spent getting to know and love this character, he was sent into the Reaper's game again, with his fate unknown. This isn't inherently bad from a writing standpoint. In fact, I quite respect how the original narrative got me so attached to Neku that this hits so hard. As for when we finally get to see what his fate was in Neo, There were some standout moments with him for sure, but he definitely already hit his peak in characterization, and the sequel doesn't do much to expand on it in any large way. But you know what? That's fine. His arc in the original release was already nearly flawless. No need to add on to that, which is far from broken. Hey, thank you so much for watching! Between the last video and this one, I've actually had some pretty good experiences with uploading these. This has nothing to do with the Neku video, I'm just happy about how this series has been doing with regards to, I don't know, how it's been before. The Foss video did pretty good, and that was my biggest video yet on my new favorite character, so I'm happy about that. I spawned a new chapter of the manga into existence, so that's fun. And the Morphinite video got advertised by some other YouTuber, Toxic P, and that was really cool. So I am happy to put another one out, and Neku is a character that I now really appreciate, so I hope I did him justice in this video. Anyways, if you liked this video, feel free to subscribe, and you can see some of the other characters I hope to analyze in the future. Anyways, catch you later.